This is the Andres Segovia Show.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the Andres Segovia Show. I'm your host, Andres Segovia. As we near the end of the year, it's that time again where a lot of you are asking me, what is the outlook for 2024, in this case, about real estate? Is it worthwhile getting into the market? It's funny because this question, actually, I get it year-round, but most of you ask me around the holidays, maybe because when we finally see each other and you remember that I am in real estate. Thanks for not remembering that. But I have a guest on today that is here to talk precisely about those very things. His name is John Casmon. He is the host of the Multifamily Insights podcast, and he's also, I believe, you are the founder of the Casmon Capital Group. I'll let you introduce yourself. John, welcome to the Andres Segovia Show.
Andres, thank you for having me. Listen, excited to be here today. And it's funny that you get that question. I thought it was just me, but I get that question around this time of year as well, where people are always asking, is now a good time to invest? And I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little bit. But to give your listeners a little bit background on me, my name is John Casmon. I am based in Cincinnati, Ohio. Although around this time of year, it is nice to get out there to California. um,
It is.
we primarily invest in real estate and particularly apartments. And we've partnered with other busy professionals to invest in over $125 million worth of apartments. Prior to this, I was actually a full-time marketer. I worked in marketing and advertising for about 15 years, working for big companies like General Motors, brands like Nike, Coors Light, Mountain Dew. And I did that for 15 years before making that transition into real estate. Yeah, you mentioned I'm the host of the podcast. So yeah, I do podcasts, I do events and other things to help teach people how to invest in apartments.
Good. And let me ask you, what made you transition from the big motor city and all that to this?
Well, there were a couple things that happened. I think the biggest was I was always interested in real estate because when I thought about how to make money and how to create wealth, certainly there are stocks and other things like that. But real estate was the one that felt attainable. It
Mm,
didn't feel like you had to be a super special person to own a piece of real estate. And that felt attainable to me. So it started with just a notion of, okay, I think I can do that. I could buy a house, I could buy a 2 unit building. And from there, it went to really a vision that scaled beyond my belief. And the biggest thing that happened was I was working at General Motors when we went through bankruptcy, and I watched
mm,
colleagues of mine get let go who did not have a plan B. Their
I see.
plan was they had this job, a really great job, right? They're working at a
Mhm.
company they probably dreamed of working at. Um, they were getting paid really well. They had a pension, they had all this great stuff, and they got let go with no plan B.
Right.
And I did not have a pension, and I did not have really the same benefits that even they had. So I realized that, hey, you better find something else right away because at any moment, this job, and not just this job, but any job, right? Any company, they could look at you and the circumstances may change and you just may not be in their plans. So that made me really look to passive income. And as I looked at passive income, I went back to say, you know what, real estate. I think real estate's the thing we can do. And from there, I tried to figure out how do I scale a portfolio that gave me the time, flexibility, and financial freedom I was looking for.
Mm. You said 15 years ago, somewhere around there.
Yeah, I was in
So,
corporate for 15 years. Yeah.
okay. For
About
15
about
years, and then you made
yeah,
the
for
change.
15 years. Yeah, I left corporate America in 2018.
2018. Oh, okay. All right. So about 5 years. No, I thought it was 15 years ago because I'm like, oh, that was right around the time the market crashed. So it's like what,
Well,
like what?
that's when I was at GM. Yeah, that's when I was
Yeah.
at GM 15 years, right in 2008. Is I was sitting there watching my leadership on the cable news shows talking about our company. So
Right. Yeah. I know. So I think we all did, and it's interesting that a lot of people, uh, they want to attain it and they feel that they can't attain it, especially like, oh, it's a up economy or down economy, and there's all this mindsets about or understandings of how and when to approach, and they always like, oh, you got to strike where the iron is hot. And what I hear very very often from would be investors is like they like to call themselves, they're like, oh yeah, I'm just waiting for the market to bottom out and then I'm gonna buy. It's like, well, it's been 25 years since you said that. When are you gonna strike? And some just never move on because like, well, you'll never unless you make the move, you won't. So my approach has been, and this is my most tuned into episode, so I actually just replay it every single January. It's called the title of it is now the right time to buy. And my principles are, whether it's an up economy or down economy, is if you're ready, able, and willing, that's when you do it. It doesn't matter when, it's when you do it. It's like, well, Andres, who would buy now? And I told you off the air, a friend of mine just moved into her new home, first time home buyers. Hey, they got it done in California, where it's supposed to be unattainable for a lot of people, and they got it done. So what's holding you back? So there's different principles. There's a model to your form of business, though, that I would like for you to share, because some people, when we think of traditional purchasing or buying their way into a property, they think, well, one, they got to get hard money loans, which are expensive. They're looking for the fix and flip. That market's been dead in California for a very long time. But it's your model's a little different, because technically the people aren't homeowners, if I'm understanding that right. Correct, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing that's different, right? We're not dealing with the residential side. So we're not dealing with homeowners or someone who's going to live there. That's a completely different model. There was a time where I flipped houses and I actually struggled. I was not a good house flipper. And part of that
Mm,
was I knew I wasn't a good house flipper. So I partnered with someone else who had that experience, and that ended up not working out for me. And it just
mhm,
happens, right? That's part of business. What I learned through that experience, though, and I already knew it, it just really reconfirmed it for me. I really want to keep my investing principles simple. So the way we invest in real estate is we invest in income producing, cash flowing, appreciating assets. So think about apartment buildings. So we like apartment buildings because one, there's multiple tenants. These tenants pay rent each month, and we buy in areas where demand is going to improve, or we have a business plan where we can drive up rents and drive up the NOI, or net operating income. And
mm,
because we have this business plan to create more money, it's going to go up in value. It's actually a business that we're buying, and we're buying this business based on the current operations. We're going to have our business plan to make the operation stronger. And then in the future, we should be able to sell at a higher price point. And the thing that goes back to the point you made, is now a good time to buy? I say yes, because the thing that people have to keep in mind, which is different from real estate than, say, stocks or any other investment, real estate, the value only matters on 2 days: the day you buy it and the day you sell it. So if you're going to buy it today, you know what the value is based on that number. So the
mhm,
only thing you really have to do is make sure you control the day you sell it. And again, unlike residential real estate, where maybe you want to move in 3 years or 5 years or whatever happens, with an investment, you can put together a plan to hold it as long as necessary. And in our case, because we're doing commercial grade apartment level investments, we have property managers in place, we have a team in place, we have a business plan that we're implementing. So we're watching it and we're monitoring the marketplace, and we're trying to figure out, when does it make sense to exit? And we don't have to. And to
mhm.
have that flexibility gives us a lot of power. And that's why we think it's always a great time to invest, because we can always adjust based on the market dynamics.
Yeah, and it's the principle that you took from the flip side of things, because that's where a lot of people getting in, they kind of get stuck on that, and they actually do apply that to multifamily residential, where we got to flip it. Then they run into the issues that some of the major cities have, where it's rent stabilization ordinances, because the buyer might want the property empty so they can have a better collection on rents and things. So those difficulties that they're probably used to flipping a single family home, and now they're applying it to multifamily, then they run into the issues, they got to hold it, economy changes, now they feel their mortgages underwater and all that, and then they just they start bowing out of it. And it's like, there's an evolution in the process that they need to do, and that's something that you did that people fail to understand. And something that, because I also do on property management, and my audience knows this, where when I've talked to homeowners that own multifamily property, and they come to tell me, that how do I deal with the RSO? How am I supposed to deal with housing inspectors, and eventually maybe code enforcement that they're involved in? Or look, I got the city after me for whatever reason. And it's like, well, have you been tending your property? And most of the times, if some people are irresponsible, don't be surprised where the laws come from. And of course, there are those that are, which is why there's me and my father and others that we tend to have relationships. Like, you forget, this is a business. Yes, it's your property, but you made a business transaction for them to technically take care of your property for an exchange of funds. And for any business, whether they're wrong, the customer is always right. And if we remember those simple business principles, you got to apply the 80/20 rule to all this, and then explaining to them, it's like your best tenants will always be the one to give you the best return, even long-term tenants and all that. And we like long-term tenancies because they take care of our buildings for us instead of leaving them empty and not getting the proper person in there. You get a squatter, and now you got to deal with that. People don't think about these things, and there is that evolution. The advantage I think that your model has is that you kind of take the legwork out of all of it. Guess what you guys are doing?
Yeah, and keep in mind, I think your points are so important. And to play it back, when you're dealing with people who are buying their own rentals, buying their own apartments, that's great, and it's a phenomenal strategy. It's exactly how we kind of started scaling our own portfolio. But I also think it's really important for people to understand how much effort it takes to run and properly manage your buildings and your portfolio. If you have a full-time job, if you have kids, little ones, if you have other things you want to do, you may not really want to be kind of the day-to-day on-site property manager for a 10-unit building where you're getting the phone calls about toilet leaks, or you're leasing it, or you're doing all the property showings. You may not want to take on that responsibility.
Correct.
So just be really clear on the role you want to play. Can
Hmm.
you get proper third party management? Is it worth the returns if you bring in third party management? And if not, I think there is still a great strategy for you to invest in real estate with your knowledge, because real estate works. Otherwise, you wouldn't be
Yeah.
investing in it, right?
Yeah.
But maybe you don't need to be the manager. Maybe you don't need to be the landlord. And that's where our group kind of comes in, right? We partner with everyday professionals to pool capital together to go out there and buy larger properties so that investors can get the same benefits of investing in real estate without the headaches of being a landlord. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying even that's right for everybody. It
Hmm.
really depends on you and your personality. If you like control, you want to be the person who's going over to the property once a week, or you want to see the tenants yourselves and you want to see the units yourself, you do not want to invest passively, right? You want to be hands
Hmm.
on, you want to take on that responsibility. If that is not what you want and you simply want to put your money into some real estate and get a return, then that's where the passive investment style comes into play. But it's really important because you mentioned, in LA, and I used to be in Chicago, right? So these
Hmm.
are cities where those landlord ordinances are really strict. They are certainly favoring the resident. And if you're not following them, it could be a really painful experience for you. So
Yeah.
you have to understand, are you really willing to invest that time and energy to understand the laws, to keep up the property the way the ordinance are asking you to make sure that, again, if you have any kind of government subsidies or any other programs that you have to abide by, they have kind of their own rules to abide by. So you have to just make sure you're staying on top of that. And if not, there may be other investing strategies that better fit your situation.
Yeah, and exactly. And I want to ask you a little bit about the model that you do, just for people to understand that there are other ways to invest. One of the things that Mark on real estate, the office that I'm co-broker in, is one of the things that we do is called the Wealth Academy. The Wealth Academy is to educate property owners, current property owners, or even tenants looking to become property owners, how they can scale and build their wealth. Because that's like one of the things that you help is building generational wealth, and that's what we want to generational wealth. Like some people, like, well, I don't know where to begin. I have a house. Like, well, you have a house, you have somewhere to begin. You already have a leg up from a renter because you have the home, and the renter could have the capital to make the move. So like, oh, great, you have the assets. So the question is, what kind of, is it hard cash assets, or do you have the property assets? Let's see what we can work with here, and then start scaling up from there. And that's something that my father ended up doing from very early on when he came to this country. One of the first things that he did to be able to eventually buy his house, um, I think I'm from the hood. I was born and raised in Compton Watts, so that's where I come from. And that's my father bought his first property. It was a triplex. My mom would tell me the stories about the splinters she would be taking out of the feet of me and my little brother,
Wow.
because the floorboards weren't really there. They hadn't even put carpet in there yet. But it's like, but this is our property. This is the first place we can call home, and the other two are for generating income for the family. My father has not sold that property. We still have it to this day. That was the beginning of everything for him. Of course, we eventually moved out of there when we grew out of the, I think it was one or two bedrooms. Um, Yeah, but it's everybody needs to understand in building generational wealth, and there's different ways to go about it. But with the mindset, some people are still stuck on it's only one way to go about it. Because I saw on your website you have like a 5 point, unless I'm misunderstanding it, but a 5 point method to your model. The way it works is I'll let you walk through instead of me trying to explain it for you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So our investing philosophy is this, right? So first and foremost, we are always taking a look at the market itself. So you talked about, investing out in LA, and I don't know if your father went through all this, but sometimes we get lucky as investors. It's true, but you want to be in a market where there's demand, and we also want to look at future demand. So we're looking at that, right? We're looking at demand. We're looking at the market. We're looking at growth, population growth. The second thing we're looking at is we want to understand what's driving it. Who are the employers? What's driving the economy? So we're looking at industry diversification. We are looking at economic growth. Are those companies growing? Are they adding more jobs to the industry? And then we want to turn around and we want to start paying attention to the multifamily trends. So are multifamily rents up? Are they down? What's going on in the multifamily sector? Is it easy to do business there? Are there a lot of laws that prohibit us from increasing rents or from building additions? What are the laws there? And then finally, we want to pay attention to the overall sector and the overall climate. Is there new construction taking place? What else is there? So these are the things we're paying attention to whenever we're looking at a property or looking at an investment. And our number one criteria is capital preservation. If investors put their money with us, we want to make sure that we give them their money back. Yes, we want to grow it. Yes, we want to deliver these great returns. But first and foremost, we want to assess the risk where we can deliver the returns back to those investors. So that's the first thing we're looking at. The second thing is we're looking to mitigate risk. Every investment has risk. I don't care what anyone tells you otherwise. If
Mm,
it's an investment, it has risk. There's a way to lose money or for it not to work out. So, what are those risks and how do you mitigate those risks? So, that's the second thing we're paying attention to. Some of those risks, as we just talked about, are outside factors like the market. If the city comes in and says you can't do whatever you wanted to do, that's going to be a risk. That's going to be a problem, right? If they
yeah.
tell you can't raise rent because of rent control, or maybe you wanted to Airbnb your place, but they stop that, or they have an ordinance where you can't do
Mm,
Airbnb. Those are potential risk, right? So we want to understand those things. What if people don't want to live there? What if they don't want to pay more money in rent, right? All of that is a risk too. You want to take rents up to $1,500 and there aren't people in that area who want to live there for $1,500. So that's a potential risk, right? So there we're going to take a look at the market. We're going to look at where rents are going, where jobs and income is going. We want to make sure we understand what people are looking for there. So we're always looking at risk. We're always looking at the industry. And then I would say last, we're giving ourselves flexibility on the back end. What's our business plan? What options do we have? If we're able to exceed our business plan, can we exit early? If we are running behind our business plan, can we hold it longer? What options and flexibility do we have? That allows us to sleep at night. And I think allows our investors to sleep at night, knowing
mm.
that we are doing that first thing, which is preserving capital.
Yeah. And what markets are you seeing that these investments are more secure, at least as of late? Because a lot of people are concerned about them in this economy.
Yeah, the market is definitely all over the place. I would say we focus on the Midwest. So I am based in Cincinnati. So we go pretty much a 2 hour radius. So think
Mm,
Columbus, Indianapolis, Louisville, Kentucky. Those are markets that we like a lot. We do invest in the Southeast region as well. We do not have anything on the West Coast. And that has less to do with, any perception about the West Coast, more about ease and access. It's further away for us to get to, and the thing with the Midwest that we like is typically there's really good cash flow. These markets are popular and in demand markets, but geographically it's well located. And when you think about some of the economies that did well during the COVID time, transportation logistics was one of the things we absolutely needed. And
mhm.
UPS, FedEx, like they're all located here.
That's
As a matter
true.
of fact, Amazon built a $1.5 billion airport hub in Cincinnati. So this is something that I think they're in the final phase of building it out now, but that's something that they committed to because they want same day deliveries. They want that
Mm,
to be the standard. So those are the kind of things we pay attention to because those jobs are pretty evergreen and they tend to do well. They're recession resistant because, as we know from COVID, people want their packages.
Yeah.
You order something, you're
Yeah.
gonna want that, and you need people to be able to physically either load it up or at least to deliver it. Things like tech, on the other hand, certainly important, but when we see the economy start to pull back, well, some of those VC capital dollars start to pull back as well, and maybe those jobs start to disappear or they're not quite as plentiful as they were in the past. So, we like those jobs that are kind of more blue collar, the logistic jobs, the service industry jobs. Those are the folks who end up being our renters. So we like to look for cities and areas where we can find those individuals.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point to that with respects to which employees, well, type of work you're looking for. Because in the case of here, for those that invested, say Silicon Valley, that's probably the Cupertino, the ones that have the biggest pull, of course. Well, Microsoft's in Richmond, but that would be Facebook, Google, Apple, and they had committed to building thousands of units that went all out the window when remote learning came along. So a lot of those projects are canceled. That changed the dynamics of things and it shifted the market in certain areas, obviously, including Orange County, where they were going to be building certain hubs that didn't happen. But you reminded me of what Amazon was doing out there because, well, yeah, I remember every time I look at all your shipments on the way, it's all coming from Kentucky. So, like, oh, yeah, it should be here like in 2 days if they put on a plane. Yeah, those are very important logistics, and that's just it that people are intimidated by getting into real estate because they have that concern, for which is why, like, well, what makes these seasoned investors stick with it? How like, people were asking me, Andres, how can you tell people to still be buying after a bottomed out market? Because the cheapest time to buy, if you got the means to get it, or when it's so high, it's like, how can you justify having to pay for a property where it's not appraising at value? Because the interest rates are all record low. There's these little things that make all the difference in the world. It's like, well, I'm going to wait for the price to drop. Yeah, but the interest rate now is very high. It's like, oh, now I have a multifamily property. I want to raise rents on them. But if you're in Los Angeles, you can't raise rents until February 2024 when the COVID order emergency is finally lifted. That's 4 years without being able to raise a rent. And not to mention the backlog of everybody that's been dealing with the eviction moratoriums. It's all these things. It can be an intimidating thing for someone to get into. But I tell them, you can always start with the basics. When you buy a home for yourself, you're investing in yourself, in your family. And even if you do nothing with that home for whatever amount of time you have left, you're passing it on to your children. You're making an investment in them where they can do something with it. That's the part of generational wealth. They probably have, if they sow the seeds right, they'll be able to do something with it. But most people are stuck on, well, I have to, no, I have to get that 10 units to start off. If I can't get it, then I won't go. I won't do anything. And I think that's more the fault of some of the articles that I've seen on business on that front. But as you also demonstrated, there isn't one clean cut way to go about it. You've taken a lot of things that you learned along the way to be able to do it. And I actually do like that you keep it within a radius because one of my first guests on my show is a buddy of mine that he just does out of state investing. But it's like you're flying everywhere. It's yeah, he's everywhere. He's flying everywhere. He lived in Los Angeles for a time, then he eventually moved to Phoenix. He's back in Southern California, but he's just flying out to his properties. But he built a system that works for him. So like, kudos, and there's more than one way to go about it. Um, I was getting a little sentimental and all that. Yeah, just a moment ago. So losing my train of thought here. But let me toss it over to you and some of the other things maybe on your model that you can elaborate on, or maybe some commentary on what I just said.
Yeah, I think that one thing I want all of your listeners to understand is that time in the market is more important than timing the market.
Hmm.
And so many people, like you said, they're waiting for the market to bottom out. They're waiting for 2011 pricing to come back. Listen, in 2011, we didn't know it was 2011 pricing. I promise you. I was
You're
searching and
correct.
looking at 2011. And the only reason I knew the market was starting to shift is I would make a list. My very first property was a 2 unit in North Center in Chicago, and my wife and I made a list. We would go on the MLS with our agent, and we
Hmm.
made a list of all the properties that fit our criteria. And we would just look at that list. And a month or two would go by, and then finally one of the properties got sold. And we're like, oh, that's interesting. We
Mm.
had our top 15 for 2 months, no movement on any of them, and one finally moved. So we added another property to go back to that top 15. Well, two more came off the list. Huh,
Mm.
interesting. The next week, five more came off. Okay, wait
Oh.
a minute. What's going on now? For
Mm.
2 months, nothing. And now, within about a 3 week period, about seven or eight of those units or properties started to come off. So, guess what? My wife and I said, okay, we need to kind of get serious now with our list. Let's go tour these properties. Let's look at them and see. We found two we really liked, one we really liked, and someone put an offer right before we could. There
Mm.
was another one that popped up on a Friday, a Thursday night. We called our broker, said, hey, I want the first showing on this. He gave us a showing Saturday at 10 a.m. Somebody else got there Saturday at 9:30. I kid you not. We were the second showing. Somebody walked out. We saw them with papers in their hands. And I'm like,
Oh.
I know they didn't get this under contract as the first person to see it. Sure enough, they got it under contract,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
So that helped us realize we were at the bottom because we were there in it. And the
Mm.
reality is, if you're not literally in it, looking at deals, analyzing it, watching it on a day by day basis, you're not going to know. And even then, it wasn't that it was the bottom. It was just okay, deals are starting to move now. If we want this property, we're going to have to do something and do it now because we don't have the 2 month luxury of just waiting around. So I
Yeah.
say that to say, you have to take action to understand what's happening in the market. If you're just sitting on the sidelines waiting to read a report that says, oh, deals are now at all-time low, or interest rates have bottomed out, or whatever your headline you're waiting for, it's too late. It will have already happened. Okay. Data looks backwards. Those headlines are looking backwards. They're taking a look at what happened in Q3 2023, and then they're going to report on it. You have to be in it during the quarter to see it real time to know, okay, this is it. Even with that said, if I would have known, I would have bought everything I could have,
Mm.
right? I would have cashed out my 401k. I would have done everything I could and bought as much real estate as I could possibly buy if I would have known it was the bottom. You're not going to know. That's revisionist history. The best thing you can do is start investing now. Start that time in the market so that you are continuing to grow, you're continuing to scale, you're starting to build those relationships, and you can always acquire more, get more aggressive with your investing approach as you're in the market if you believe that now is the right time to buy, or in the future it's the right time to buy. You can always double down if you feel like it's a great time to acquire more assets, or if you feel like interest rates are crazy low and you want to lock those in, right? You can
Hmm.
always make moves based on what you're seeing real time in the market, but you're not going to build that confidence up if you're not actually in the market. To your point, people have been saying this for 23 years. I know investors who, since I started seriously investing in commercial back in 2017, they told me, "Oh, it's about to bottom out." And keep in mind, at that point, we had been on like a 6 year bull run, so it made
Mm.
sense that what they were saying. But they stopped investing in 2018. And it's not
Mm.
till right here towards the end of 2023 we're actually starting to see that. So they missed an entire cycle of
Yeah.
investing. So I don't believe in trying to time the market or, hey, I'm gonna wait for this. Like, just invest. And for us, the way we say that is because we're investing in cash flowing assets. I would
Hmm.
not say this if I was flipping, but we're buying something that should cash flow, period. So it really doesn't matter if we hold it, a certain period of time, right? We're gonna cash flow. It's making money. It's paying for itself, and it's gonna hopefully create a little profit for us. So because we take that approach, we don't have to worry as much about waiting on this or trying to time the market or anything like that. And that's the approach we would suggest for people: is invest in income producing cash flowing assets, because the property is going to pay for itself, and now you're not as worried about, okay, well, hey, I'm losing money every month, or did I really buy this at the right time? And maybe, the things that come in from that standpoint.
Yeah, and also to jump on that, in income producing property, the only certain income that keeps going up is rent, even with RSLs. Technically, you will eventually raise it. Even if it's on a schedule, it's going to go up. And some people fail to see that. It's both a good thing and a bad thing about it being so simple about investing in real estate. It's also like, well, it's not that simple. Like we discussed so
It's
many
simple,
things.
not easy, right? It's
It's
simple,
simple, not
not
easy.
easy.
Yes,
But
yeah,
let's use your example, right? You mentioned your father buying that property, that 3 unit, right?
mhm.
And when people talk about, oh, I'm waiting for the market, here's a great question. Do you think the market is going to go up over the next 30 years? You think that property is going to be worth more in 30 years? What
Oh,
about
that's
10
wrong.
years, right?
Yeah.
And if the answer is yes to both of those, you've got your answer. I'm not asking, do you think it's going to be worth more next year or in
Hmm.
6 months or in 18 months? Like, who knows? But in 10 years, I think most of us would agree that we would expect the property values to be higher in 10 years and definitely in 20 years,
Yeah.
right? So in that case, what are you waiting for?
Yeah. And I think it's because of just how much attention was drawn to the 2007 2008 housing meltdown that for a lot of people that's their point of reference. For someone like me that's 39, there's a little bit more reference to my life experiences. The housing bubble that no one talks about anymore, it seems, because they talk about that one is the housing crash in the 90s. It's like, how come no one mentioned that? Or what about the housing loans in the 80s? And just keep going backwards. There's always something, but I think I think because they kind of brought the world to its knees, that they kind of look at 2008 as the big marker, and it's like, well, that's what happens when the policies in place disincentivize protections for loans that then people can't pay back, and then you get the monster that happened with, uh, and what happened thereafter though that nobody really talks about is within 10 years all that appreciation that took 30 years to build was basically recovered and in some cases surpassed. And that is bonkers. And everybody thought for sure COVID is going to make the prices go down. They went up. And I feel like I was the only one telling people that you're going to buy now, buy during this time. It's like, why? Because people that are high earned renters, which we have a lot here in California, a lot of high earned renters that they never believed in buying, didn't like the idea of being stuck in a four walled room for 4 weeks. They went out to the market. Now you're competing as 20, 40, no joke, 40 different people, different customers per showing. I mean, it was insane. And even when the interest rates went up, okay, from 40 to 20, like you're still dealing with 20. And you had sellers asking, oh, um, remove your contingency criteria for appraisals. Like, oh my goodness, it was an insane time. Even like 2 or 3 years later, after COVID, it's like, look, you thought for sure that this is it's going to bottom out. So then it's like you said, we didn't know we're in the bottom and we're in the bottom. So it's like when you're ready, able, and willing. That's what I said at the beginning. You take action. I think I said it before we started recording. So if I reiterated, audience, I'm sorry, but I've known people for 25 years that said they're waiting for the market to bottom out so they can buy. They're still renting. It's like a lot of it's just talk. So it does start with the mindset. And like, you had that mental mindset. You made that shift. My father did. And because it was ingrained in me, I became an investor at a very, very young age. What I didn't invest in was a primary residence until much later. But I'm happy to finally have my 4 kids and my wife in a home we call our own. It's like, yeah, this is not meant to flip. This is for us. So, you got to get out of that funk. But it's all starts with your mindset. And if we're being data driven is important, but you can't translate that data, then it really means nothing. And that also goes to where the data is coming from. 2019, this is when I launched my the rebirth of my podcast in a way where I started emphasizing more of the real estate side of things. I was mainly ever just promoting myself and my business services, but one thing that I kept getting was every time my searches would come up, I would see, is buying a home a good investment? Because that's one of the episodes that I made. But you see Forbes, Business Insiders. There's 2019, by the way, bad. Don't invest in a home. And I see the articles; they were from 2018. I'm like, hold on, you guys been saying for like 12 to 18 months to not buy a home when interest rates are at a historic low? What's going on here? And it's because it was the investor's mindset trying to coach people that were trying to graduate from being a renter to a homeowner that was disincentivizing them. Guess what I saw over the summer? These same articles are now saying now is a great time to buy. Yeah, after people, the renters probably expended their savings, you're telling them to go buy now. It's like that's why I tell people, and that again, and I put the SOCs, the search engine optimization, to make sure is like make sure that this episode is the one that comes up in the first searches. Now is the time when you're ready, able and willing, take it. And if you're not able to now, find out what you need to be ready. So those are the studies that you can take. Like just like you do, that's what your company does. That's what anybody getting into anything does. But it's this mindset. It's kind of the retail mindset. No, I'm waiting for Black Friday. It's like what? What? It's like okay, but it's not on the calendar anywhere. So yeah, that definitely is a thing there. And I don't want to be remiss if I don't bring this up. So for your podcast, because I imagine you cover this, but also with a lot of people that deal within the industry, is this what people can learn? Because what multi well, let me walk this back a little bit. Multifamily, because some people think multifamily residential. You mentioned commercial. Do you do both or one or the other?
We do a little bit of both. I mean, most of it is it does lean more on the commercial side, but I would say a lot of the principles are similar. And I started with multifamily residential with 2 unit, 3 unit
Mm,
before into an 8 unit building. So I completely understand that. And yeah, so our show Multifamily Insights will teach people how to invest in multifamily, whether you want to be active or passive. Everything from managing tenants to raising capital for deals to looking for red flags and what to look for in operators, property management companies that you hire, all those kind of things we get into on the show, speaking with other successful investors, industry professionals, property management companies, vendors, technologists, all those different things. Um, we're 550 plus episodes in, so there's a great database of content there. So whatever it
yeah.
is specifically you're looking for, we've probably interviewed somebody on that topic. I want to go back to what you said though about that person who has been waiting to invest. I think one thing that holds people back beyond just mindset, well, I guess it's part of mindset, right?
Mm,
It's understanding how to get information and understanding that a lot of times, that fear, they say, stands for false evidence appearing real. And the first thing that seems counterintuitive is that, well, I don't have enough money to invest in my first deal. That seems logical, right? It's like, okay, to buy a property, you need money. I don't have a whole lot of money. But if you really think about it and you understand and process, one, you may have more access to capital than you believe. And then two, there may be programs out there that can help you. So that first deal I did was a 2 unit building. We lived in one unit, rented out the other. But we got a loan, which was an FHA loan, which I didn't
mm,
even know about prior to, saving up all my money and going to look for a property. And
mhm.
with an FHA loan, you can put down as little as 3.5% of the entire capital, which means you're getting a 96.5% loan to value on that deal. So if you're going to live in a property, and especially if you have kind of a clear path of adding value, if you're going to renovate the kitchen or do something to add value to it, it is a great loan to get started. And for me, it was a game changer. That loan allowed us to take the money we thought we were going to need for the down payment and we put it into the property. We renovated the kitchen, we redid the outside area, the exterior, the landscaping, and all the work we did actually allowed us to create 6 figures worth of equity to that
Nice.
project. And for me, that was the sign that, oh, I knew the real estate thing worked, right? Like I read books and, I read enough stuff about it. So I know
Yeah.
it worked, but I didn't know anybody who actually did it. So
Mm,
for
yeah.
me to actually do that and to get it, it made it real and it allowed me to double down. And I think for you, it's probably seeing your father, right?
Yeah.
Invest in that 3 unit and the work he took. And if it's still in the family, we can only imagine how much it's appreciated over this time, right? So
Yeah.
that made it real to you. And the reality is most of us talk about generational wealth, but we're not willing to take that first step of where they're creating it. And a job is not going to create generational wealth,
Mhm.
you know? And the reason I say it, I don't care how much money you make. You can make $1 million a year. Generational wealth comes down to assets because the moment you stop working when you have a job, there's no more income. You can't pass your
Mhm.
degree or your title on to your kids. So all you have are your assets. So that could be cash, certainly, but you need to find a way to create assets. So it's cash. It could be, again, income producing properties, businesses, whatever it is. That's what goes on your balance sheet, right? That's what you're going to be given to your heirs. So you need to invest in that. And if you're not taking the time to identify what those assets are that you're going to invest in now, or you're not taking steps to create and invest in assets, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's not enough to have a good salary. You've got to figure out how to create assets that's going to get you on that path of creating generational wealth.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to instill in my children, to make sure that we don't lose it. Because it's very easy to spoil my children. I know that my parents spoil. Well, my mom spoils my kids. I was like, well, I didn't get any of that when I was growing up. So like not that I don't mind them having it, but it's like, mom, just don't condition them because then they're gonna have this expectation. So then when I tell them stories about how I grew up, they're like, they can't even register. It's like, what do you mean that your crib was a plastic baby tub? It's like, well, that's all they could get for me. That's my humble roots. Not to mention my parents are from homelessness in the third world country. Now that's where they come from. And they were able to live what is still known as the American dream here. It's
Yeah,
attainable. And what sounds like to me, just like my father, it sounds like, because you said you've read, you studied a lot of these things. You're the trailblazer for your family. That's what I'm getting
that's
from you.
fair. Yeah, that's fair to say.
Yeah, and now look at you now. You're setting the bar really high, by the way, for your family. So, and so your kids have expectations. I know I felt I had to get out of my father's shadow, so that became a thing too. But that's also something that you planting the roots down, through a business, aka real estate here too, where the roots are being set down to. They'll be here long after we are, and who knows, that's passed on from who knows to the next generation and the generation afterwards. I mean, isn't that what sometimes monuments are for? It's like, oh, that was passed down from this so many times. That's real estate. It's amazing how this has been instilled in humanity. And I want everybody that can, for the renters especially here that I deal, because of what I deal with in Los Angeles and Orange County, where there's always a complaint about property owners. Not us, but they complain about landlords and stuff. It's like, well, stick it to them. Become a property owner. Now you're the competition. And some of them are like, yeah, that makes a good point. Some of those individuals that spend so long waiting, they cashed in finally in supposedly the hardest year in California, in Los Angeles of all places. And they did. They finally found a home further out than they would have wanted, but they took the advice, they ran with it, they got a home, they called their own, and they're happy. And that's what matters. There's a financial freedom that comes with it. And for those that need to know, they heard a lot of the logistics that are involved when owning a multifamily property, but even in owning a home where people don't think about this, and now they'll understand the landlord. It's like, okay, so now you have homeowners insurance and you have the utilities you got to look after yourself if you haven't covered it before. If you have a yard, now you got to maintain the yard, which costs money, which adds to your utilities, and any other expenses that are associated with the cost of living. And studies show that property owners tend to save money more than renters do. It's like disposable income from renters because they don't have a financial obligation or responsibility. But over here, uh, property owners do save because they have something to take care of. And it's kind of like a parent with a child, where you have that fiscal responsibility. So there's a mental shift that takes place. Again, this is all mindset that shifts, and it all happens with real estate. And as I tell my audience here too, it's like, hey, that's where your freedoms begin. Those are your rights, property rights. While under attack in this country, you grab a hold of them and make the most of it, and then you'll realize what you can pass on to your children thereafter. It's a beautiful thing. It's all part of this whole generational wealth building, and I think your model is pretty unique. I guess let me ask you this about your model. It's because I'm here in the West Coast. Is your I, the way I was taking it, and for the layman that's probably hearing this, so it's kind of like buying into a program in a way, where it's like, well, I'm investing in stocks, but instead of stocks, I'm investing in you to invest in real estate. Would that be a fair characterization?
Not quite. So I would say it this way. Let's say 10 people, I'll use this example, right? Let's say 10 people all had $100,000 and all of us want to invest in real estate. Well, we could all buy 10 single family homes or whatever we want to get separately, right?
Hmm.
And we can buy that and manage it ourselves or hire a property management company. What we do is the 10 of us, instead of doing it individually, we come together. So now instead of $100,000 each, we now have $1 million. And we take that $1 million and we may go get us a $3 million property, right? So got our down payment, a little bit of money for reserves, and now we can have a professional property management company. Maybe one of us manages that property management company, and the rest of us get the same benefits of being owners without having to do the day-to-day elements of it. So what
Hmm.
essentially happens is we create an LLC, and our investors own shares of the LLC, which owns the real estate. And they get all the perks of owning the real estate, which is, again, the tax breaks. So we get our depreciation, our bonus depreciation, all that passes through directly to our investors. It is a passive income, so it qualifies for all of that from a tax standpoint. But they get the direct ownership. So again, they get to take all of that, but because they're in a limited position, they actually don't have the same exposure. So they're a limited partner, which means that if there were any lawsuits or anything like that, they're not personally liable for any of those kind of things. The company takes that on. The general partnership partners have a little bit of exposure, but the limited partners have no more exposure in that. So that's a little bit different than if you were to invest in a property yourself. Obviously, you
Yeah.
want to get insurance or you want to get other things to protect yourself. But in this case, there is a little bit of separation that happens. And I would say, the people who tend to invest with us are people who are either busy professionals who get real estate but don't really want to be a landlord themselves, are
Hmm.
looking more for the long term. They want a combination of cash flow as well as upside appreciation. They want the tax benefits. And to give you a little context, on most of our deals, if you were to invest, let's just say $50,000 in a deal of ours, typically we are providing about $20,000 to $25,000 in paper losses. Now, again, that's not guaranteed, but that's a paper loss, which means you're able to take that off of other passive income that you have. So, for some of our really sophisticated investors, they love to invest just to get the paper losses so they can reduce their tax liability.
Hmm.
So, there's a lot of different reasons. We have folks who are maybe in retirement, but I would say who there are people who should not invest with us too, right? Again, if you really want to be hands on and make all the decisions yourselves and see the property, this is not what you want to do because you're not going to have that
Hmm.
access, right? If
Yeah.
you have very limited capital, you don't have the money to invest. Well, every investment has risk, and our minimum investment is $50,000. So that is one thing that is a barrier. So for some of those folks, it may not be a good fit. But I would say too, whether it's with us or even the stuff you're doing, again, people sometimes have retirement dollars that they can access, and people may not know that a lot of times you can roll over those retirement dollars into a self-directed account and then use that to invest in real estate. Now, that can't be for self-dealing. You can't go live in the property,
Correct.
but you
Yeah.
can invest if it's a true investment. You can do it as an investment vehicle. So I'm a firm believer of live where you want to live. California is one of the most beautiful places in the world. Definitely one of the most beautiful states that we have in the U.S. So if you want to live in California, it makes a ton of sense. But invest where it makes sense for you. If you could be hands
Hmm.
on and navigate the landlord ordinances in your market, by all means do that. If you don't have the time, the energy, or you're just not comfortable with it, then invest outside of that area, which I know a lot of people do. But that's where it
Yeah.
makes sense to maybe partner with a group like ours as opposed to trying to take that on yourself.
Yeah, and I'm glad you spelled it out because I don't want to speak it for you, but um, that structure is what some people do want to do. They partner up with us. Um, well, similar approach at a smaller scale, I would say, and yeah, then they cash out in a way. And so I like that. I thank you for explaining that because I know that there's going to be people that a lot of the stuff flies over their head because they're hit by a lot of information and a lot of people don't understand that there's just so much to just that nutshell that you just shared there at the end. It's like the possibilities that you can do. talk to your CPA, folks. If you have your IRA, your whatever other retirement accounts you might have and investments, because there are things that you technically can do with it. But I, as a licensed real estate broker, cannot tell you what to do with this. I can tell you talk to your tax attorney or your tax preparer, anybody. Let them do the explanation for you. But yeah, there's just so much that they can do, and what the benefits means. That's why when it comes to owning a real estate, or it's like mortgage, uh, you're investing into your property interest, investing into your, oh my goodness, did I just mix these up? I'm sorry, I'm hungry. Remember I told you it's the lunch hour.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm getting my catchphrases wrong here. But the point is that where you can be taking investment into your property and also taking a tax benefit from it. And that's what you can do with the mortgage that you cannot do with rent. So when people are concerned, it's like, well, I don't want to get into commitment, even at a limited level. I don't know. That's a big commitment. Well, let me ask you this. When are you going to pay off your rent? You don't. There's no end game. You might as well start a plan, and it starts somewhere. And it's all the mindset. You got the right mindset. It's like, I want to finish this. Okay, then get going. Ready, able, and willing. Do it. You. What was that timeline catchphrase that you just had earlier? I like that one.
Time in the market is more important than timing the market.
Yes, yes, and I think that's I think that that's enough to give the audience here to end on a high note on that one. So I do appreciate your time, but before we wrap for the audience, by all means, let them know where they can learn more about your company and what you do, and maybe the socials where they can keep in touch with you.
Yeah, listen, we've got our podcast, Multifamily Insights, which is available anywhere you listen to podcasts. And then if you're interested in learning more about the deal structures or some of the deals that I mentioned, it is a lot to take in a very brief moment. So we have a sample deal package on our website. You can go to casmoncapital.com/sample deal. And there you can access it and just start wrapping your head around, what does this look like? What does it mean? How does it work? All that information is right there. Again, it's casmoncapital.com/sample deal.
Simple deal. And for those of you listening on the podcast, all these notes will be available at the show notes accompanies episode at www.theinterestinggover.com. John, thank you so very much for joining me on the Interesting Over Show. We're wrapping for the audience, but don't hang up yet. But thank you so very much. You know what? I like to pick your brain. Maybe, who knows, maybe around this time next year, we might be able to talk again.
No, I love it. Thank you for having me today. I appreciate it.